After the problems with the K-class, the Royal Navy had focused its attention away from fleet submarines, that is, submarines fast enough to keep up with a battle fleet, and instead they'd looked at large patrol submarines for distant waters, as well as raiders like X-1. But in the mid-1920s, the fleet submarine came back up for discussion. Most Royal Navy fleet commanders thought that they were an unnecessary luxury, with the exception of the Atlantic Fleet commander who rather liked the idea, but most of the others accepted that curtailing research into large, high-speed, fast-diving submarines could potentially hamper technology development which could then be used in other, more useful subs. Initially envisaged with a top speed of 25 knots to help them keep ahead of the main battle line or keep up with a force that was made up of the Queen Elizabeths and the battle cruisers, this ambition was rapidly dropped to 22 knots, which was 1 knot faster than general fleet speed. The requirement for long-distance endurance and possible use in the tropics ruled out trying to make steam turbines work again, since these were considerably less fuel-efficient than diesels and would overheat a submarine outside of northern cold waters. At first, it was thought that maybe a version of X-1, but with newer engines and eliminating the main gun battery, might be a good starting point. Then, the Geneva talks in 1927 put a temporary hold on the idea, as it was possible the large sub might be banned completely, but when those talks collapsed, the idea came back onto the table. It was decided that if stern tubes were eliminated from the design and the pressure hull was rated for 300 feet of depth instead of 500, then the existing diesel power plants might allow the target speed to be reached. A series of ideas were then presented. Each had 6 torpedo tubes in the bow, plus 1 set of reloads, and a 4-inch deck gun. The main difference being a variety of possible engine fits, ranging from massive single 4,300 brake horsepower engines, 1 per shaft, all the way down to simply taking a pair of 2,300 brake horsepower engines, which were then in service with other submarines, and sticking them either side of each propeller shaft and then linking their power output together. Of these, Design G, which used 3 shafts, each with a single 2,300 brake horsepower engine, was chosen to progress initially, although its design speed was somewhat below the looked-for 22 knots. This led to the idea of what they termed a battle submarine. This would not necessarily be fast enough to keep up with the fleet at full speed, but it would be fast enough to at least be in the general area when battle commenced. But this halfway house was rejected pretty quickly as big, expensive, and not really able to accomplish all that much that a patrol submarine couldn't. Instead, attention was focused on improving the design. Underwater speed was to be increased to 10 knots from an original 7 or 8 by including more batteries and more powerful motors. The propulsion would be reduced to 2 shafts, which simplified the machinery layout, but the diesel engines were then given superchargers, which it was hoped would boost the power output to about 3,800 or 4,000 brake horsepower per engine. Officially rated at 1,800 tons standard displacement, but practically speaking displacing a little over 2,160 tons when surfaced and just under 2,700 tons when submerged, HMS Thames was laid down in 1931, and when she went on trials, it turned out that her engines wildly exceeded expectations, kicking out no less than 9,960 brake horsepower combined, and sending the sub closer to 23 knots than 22. And it turned out that her cooling systems kept everyone nice and comfortable, even in tropical waters. It was planned to build a large number of these submarines, but after the Severn and the Clyde were built, in the next 2 years, each displacing about 50 tons more than the Thames due to having stronger pressure hulls, it was decided to use the remaining submarine tonnage allowance for the Royal Navy by constructing more numerous small subs like the S and T classes, and thus the River-class subs, sometimes called the Thames class to avoid confusion with the River-class frigates, was curtailed at just 3 units. During the Second World War, Thames had a relatively short life. After some general patrols, she tried to sink the damaged battleship Gneisenau, which had already been torpedoed by her sister ship Clyde, but she ended up hitting and sinking the escorting Type 24 torpedo boat Luce instead. Shortly after this, she appears to have struck a mine and was lost with all hands. Severn and Clyde, meanwhile, survived the war, spending much of their time in the unusual role of convoy escort, where their speed and range was thought to be useful as they could keep up with a convoy easily, but then potentially could submerge and target enemy surface raiders, which themselves had fairly little anti-submarine warfare capability. But they were also used to try and intercept enemy blockade runners and U-boats, with Clyde also using her size to transport vital supplies to Malta in 1941. The submarines would also be used to transport special forces, and ended the war operating against the Japanese, with a total of 10 confirmed kills between them over the course of the war. But, with both submarines somewhat outdated, they would be rapidly decommissioned and scrapped pretty much as soon as the war was over.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.